Hello everyone, welcome back to class. Today we're going to be taking a look at some advanced formulas and functions that we can use within Google Sheets that can help serve and make things a little bit easier for us, as well as a couple functional things for us to be aware of as well. Without further ado, let's get started. We left off dealing with basic formulas, and one of the things that we talked about was to do any formula or function. You have to start off with the equal sign, and then you would just put in whatever operation you want to do. They would preload some, you can see here, that they think you might be looking for based on whatever it is. But I want to talk to you today about some of the more advanced things that can be just as helpful. Now, we have our gas log here. I know that I went to Costco some number of times for gas last year, but I want to know how many times did I get gas at Costco. I can't just do a straight count formula because that's going to count everything. I'm only looking for one specific type of counting, so I don't want to use count. I want to use a different formula called Countif. Okay, so I hit Countif and I'll select it, and first thing I do is I select the range. So I'm selecting the entire range, just like I did. I'm going to then use a comma to say, hey, I want to go to the next value. And in this case, I want to do quote Costco. And you'll see that once I do that, it counts only the number of entries for Costco for how in that list. Now you can do Countif conditionally, as well as a number greater than something, or a value less than something, or a value exactly equal to something. All of those are fine options. Those are all different things, but there are a couple important things to note. One of the biggest ones is in your criteria, unless you're referencing a cell, you need to put whatever your criteria is in quotes. If you don't have those quotes in there, it's not going to work well for you. So if I took out my quotes, no quotes for Costco, I hit go, you'll see that there's nothing that kicks back. So make sure that you're putting things in quotes unless you're referencing a cell value. So that's one. And there are a bunch of different if ones. There's Countif, there's sum if. I think there's even an average if. Yep. Okay. And then there's also ifs, which means you might have more than one criteria to it. So maybe it's like Costco or BP, or not Costco, whatever it happens to be. So that's one of those formulas. Another one that I want to show you guys is what's called the Sparkline formula or function. We're all familiar with graphs, and if you've ever created a graph in Sheets, you know it can be a little bit busy. And it gives you a lot of information, but sometimes you don't need all of it. Maybe you're just looking at a general trend. That's where a Sparkline can come in handy. And to do that, you just use equals Sparkline, and basically it tells you here it's a mini chart with a single cell. So I choose that, and I choose the data I want to use. I hit go, and there you can see a Sparkline graph, and that's all it is. It's just a quick line graph based on the values you say. There's no reference points, there's no values associated with it. It's just max to min, and you can see what's there. Really good if you're trying to identify a kid's path. Like, you're looking at a student's grades and you're thinking, ooh, they're not doing so hot. A Sparkline can be really helpful in helping you see, like, are they not doing hot, or has that been their trend overall and you just maybe noticed it now? It gets you a good idea very quickly of where a student is performing compared to where you think they should, maybe how they might have been performing. And you might see spikes and dip. You'll see the spikes and dips, but you also see like, okay, no, they've trended pretty steady. It's just they had a hot streak going on before, and they've kind of fallen back into their normal groove. Or a kid maybe dropped real low, and now they're back up to their normal groove. And it's a good way to help identify that. One of the things, though, I do want to mention with you guys, I'm going to open up a new sheet to do a new sheet if you didn't know. At the bottom left, there's a plus button. You just hit the plus. It opens up a new sheet. One of the things that I've always had to deal with teachers coming and asking me is like, Eric, They come in, and I got this sheet, and I got all the kids' names, and their names are all in one column, and it's their first name and then their last name, and so I can't put them in order, and it's really annoying, and I'm tired of having to like manually reorder all my stuff. Is there a way to do it automatically? And I go, breathe. Yes. What you can do is you can split the data. So let's say I have James, Jones, Chris, Cross, me, Janet, Smith, and Zach. I don't know. Schneider. Okay, so I've got all these students in here, and they're not in any sort of order. Let me make this a little bit bigger for you guys. Make it a little bit easier to read for everybody. Okay, they're not in order, and I want them sorted by their last name. And you can clearly see they are not sorted by their last name. One of the functions that we have here is the ability to split text in a cell into multiple cells. And there's a couple things that you need to be aware of that, and I'll get to those in a sec. But to do that, you would select the column that you want to split. You go to Data, and then if you scroll down Data, you'll see Split Text to Columns. You'll click that option, and it'll say, what's your separator? Do you want it to detect automatically? Do you want it to use a comma, a semicolon, a period, a space? In this case, I'm going to use a space. And you'll see that it splits them across. Now, I will say this isn't 100% effective. Depending on how kids are entered into your school online gradebook, whether and then you have kids with like hyphenated last names or two last names or their middle name. It can be thrown off, but it's a good starting point, and then you just have to kind of clean it up. Is how I like to see it. And you can see I've now done all this. I can put filters on. Actually, I don't even need to put filters on for this. I have no headers. I can come over here to column B, and I can just sort it A to Z, and now all of my students are in alphabetical order. And now you're going to tell me, but the last names need to be first. Okay, that could be done too. If you select a column, you can click, drag it off, and move the entire column. But now they're in two separate cells. I want them in one cell. At this point, I tend to look at the person, and I say, just tell me what you want, I'll tell you how to do it. And they generally say they want kids in one cell for last name, comma, first name. And I say, okay, good, we're almost there. And this brings us up to another one of our functions called concatenate. Concatenate is basically how you join the data in two separate cells into one cell. So equals concatenate. And then there are some rules you have to be aware of here. So the first thing is, we're choosing a cell here. So we choose our cell value. Then you hit comma. And then oftentimes, before I finish explaining this to people, they go, oh, I got it. And then they go, okay. They choose a second one, and they hit enter. And then they come back to me saying it's wrong. And they show me what they did. And I said, no, it's right. You just missed a step in there. And that's why concatenations can be tricky. You have to put everything you want in the concatenation in it. So in this case, they needed a next after that first comma, they needed to do, and this has to go in quotes, quote, comma, space, close the quote, go to the third line. Now the reason you put that in there, so now when it runs, you can see Churis, comma, space, Eric. We're ready to go. And again, like I showed last time, you can use this little box to autofill, and all the names are now in place, last name first, alphabetized. Once you've done that, don't delete these two things. I either tell people to do one of the following. You can copy them, and then right-click, paste special as values only, which basically replaces the formula with the value in the cell, or just hides columns A and B. It's up to you at that point. I don't dictate, I let it go whichever you think is easier. I prefer to hide them. This way, if I need to go back to them, I can. But some people don't like hiding cells, and that's a personal opinion. I don't judge. But it's also very helpful. Okay. So that covers concatenations and how to split data. I also want to do with that one last thing, following along in this line of formulas, is what's called a conditional format. A lot of times spreadsheets get a lot of data in them, especially like if you're doing a spreadsheet of grades. And sometimes you want to make things pop and stand out to you. Maybe you're reviewing a quiz you did, and you want to like try and identify what was a question all the kids nailed, what was a question they all struggled on. That's where these can come in handy. So what we're going to do here is we're going to do a conditional format on column F, and I'm going to go under Format. And under Format, you'll see there's an option for conditional formatting, and I'm going to apologize because my face is going to be covering part of this kick-out window now. But fortunately, it shouldn't cover anything that you're really looking at. And so what you see here is conditional formatting. You can choose a single color or a scale depending on how it goes. In this case, I generally tell people just stick with a single color. Scales are nice, but if you don't do it right, it can look messy. And what you do is you go and you choose what range are we applying this conditional format to. In this case, we pre-selected it. What's the rule that we're looking for? I'm going to say text is exactly Costco. Oops, sorry, I don't need the quotes in that. It's so confusing. And you'll see as I type these in, it does preview my result. And for those of you that don't know, Costco's a red text on a white background, but I'm going to actually inverse them and do a white text on a red background so they stand out a little bit more. And you'll see just like that, it's there. Now if I typed in Costco at a later point, it automatically gets that formatting. Yes, the answer to the question that's coming up is, can I format an entire row using this? You can. It's a little tricky, and I'll put a separate video up for how to do that a little bit later because it involves a couple other rules I'm not really covering right now. But those cover the main things I want to take a look at today. If you ever need to change your conditional formatting, if you open up the conditional format, you can change your rules, or if need be, you can just delete an old rule and it goes away. But that covers conditional formats, as well as some of the more advanced formulas I wanted to show you guys that I felt would be helpful as a teacher. Stay tuned when you come for our next video coming out in probably a day or so, which is going to be dealing with how to do charts and graphs. And finally, we're going to close out this topic with how to make a scavenger hunt activity for you guys. That'll self-score and everything else, so kids don't have to do crazy complicated math for themselves. Not that they can't, but because hey, I say if you got the tech, use it. But until then, everyone, I hope you had a wonderful time with me today, and I'll see you again. But for now, class dismissed.